Hello, OneTAKE listeners. Welcome back to OneTAKE Live, coming to you via LinkedIn and Twitter. I'm your host, Ian Barkin. Thank you once again for joining us. It is a thrill to be sharing the insights, the expertise, and the perspectives of experts across a broad spectrum. For those who aren't familiar, OneTAKE sets out to explore the future of work, life, and culture, and how it impacts everything that we do, frankly, and took on sort of a heightened, importance, at least in my own head, in the last few months as the globe collectively faces interesting challenges that will hopefully transform us all for the better. So without further ado, so as I said, future of work is a popular topic on the show. Have a lot of good speakers who speak to it. More often than not, it's emphasizing the technologies that are involved in helping us sort of achieve this future of work. Automation is often referred to, and then it emphasizes change management and sometimes the people involved. And that is why I could not be more thrilled to welcome my next guest on OneTAKE to talk about the entire spectrum of what the future of work means for organizations. And so without further ado, I want to welcome Heather McGowan to OneTAKE. Heather, welcome to the show.
Hi, how you doing? Thanks so much for having me.
No, thank you for joining me. So Heather, this because this is live, this is where I awkwardly talk more about you as you sit there, and then you get to correct me for all the things that I've said wrong.
All righty.
I'll be quick because I've so much I want to cover with you, and also just as we're doing this, if you are joining us, please share your name, where you're joining from. I'd love to see it. I'd love to read your name out. Welcome you to the show. And if you have any questions, also please feel free to share those with us via LinkedIn. So Heather, you have put together, you've done quite a few things. You were a keynote speaker, you're a professor, you're a writer, you write for Forbes, you talk about the future of work as a concept, and you most recently came out with this guy right here, the Adaptation Advantage, which we will put links to in the show notes because seriously, guys, this is an incredible book. I absolutely suggest that you get it, not only for yourself, but for your leadership, for your teams. There's a lot in here that we'll try to unpack some of. So thank you for this, Heather. I will start you off with a question, and just to prove that I've read the book, at the risk of tying your personal and professional identities and trapping you in your past, what did you want to do when you grew up, and how did you evolve in your career and come to be able to write this guy right here?
I started working when I was really young, and not because I had to. My parents were fine, but they went to like the town hall and got me working papers because I was like, I want to work. I want to go have experiences. And I worked in nursing homes and pottery studios and grocery stores and worked all these different lifeguards, scooped ice cream, you name it. I did it. And as soon as I got the gist of it, I would move on and do something else. There was something about work I found deeply fascinating. And then when I went to university, there was this big, like, what is your major going to be? Like, it was the greatest decision of my life, defining the next 50 or 60 years. And I was interested in behavior. So maybe psychology, because that's all I knew about behavior. And I was interested in design. And the limits of what I understood design to be was graphic design. And that's the problem. Because we sort of pick what we know. And I happened to stumble upon Rhode Island School of Design, which was affiliated with Brown. So I could study design, including a bunch of fields I didn't know anything about. And I could study behavior at Brown. So that's how I ended up there. I stumbled into something called industrial design, which is really product design, but it also includes design strategy and design thinking before that existed. And from there, it was just a series of experiences. I designed baby products, medical products, sporting goods. And then everybody said, you're asking too many questions about business. You should go get an MBA. Went and got an MBA, got interested in finance. So it's just been this series of learning tours, really, without really knowing where it was going to end up. And it's really kind of interesting and ended up here.
There we go. That's tremendous. So there are so many sort of quotes and summarizations in this book that I've underlined. I ran through a red pen, underlining some real great takeaways. One of them I want to start us off with because I think it sets a good tone for the discussion. But the comment is, the slowest rate of change for the rest of your life is right now. Mm-hmm. What does that mean?
Well, we just keep waiting for things to be over. Like, we look at this pandemic. We're like, when are we going to go back to normal? When are we going to be on the other side of this? And indeed, we want to gather again. We want to hug people again, and we want to go to bars again, and we want to go to sporting events again. I want to do live keynote talks again, not just virtual ones. So there's lots of stuff we're yearning for that we're on hold for a moment. But look at all the stuff we've done. You know, in the inside of 2 weeks, every university, K-12 system, et cetera, went online.
Yeah.
And they all said they couldn't do it before until they did it in 2 weeks.
Right.
And every leader in a company who said, I don't want my people working from home, suddenly had distributive teams. They were trusting and they were performing. So I don't know why we'd want to go back, but there's always this sort of, you know, I start off the book with Chris Shipley and I should say, my co-author, Chris Shipley and I start off the book by a couple of quotes from Dan Gilbert, who's a psychologist, who say that, you know, human beings are very good at remembering and terrible at imagining. Mm-hmm. And we think we're a work in progress that mistakenly thinks we're finished. And I think those two quotes together kind of sum up, you know, this notion of when are we going to go back? We're better at looking in the rearview mirror. And now the car's going faster than it's ever gone before. So driving by looking in the rearview mirror is so dangerous.
Yes. No, I again, a lot of great things to underline. That concept of we're a work in progress that thinks that we're done really did strike me, because it sort of sets a tone that you need to realize that you're a work in progress. You need to embrace it. There was another characterization that you made, which is, and I guess for structuring our discussion, I want to talk about us as people and as aspiring individuals and businesses in life, and then also want to take some of your lessons and talk about enterprises and then ultimately the leadership of those enterprises. From a people perspective too, you say something that I really embraced, which is think of your career as a continual beta.
Yep.
And I guess some of that's colored by all of the jobs that you had through your childhood. Maybe you didn't realize it, but you were thinking of your career as a continual beta and you were learning from it. Explain that concept.
Yeah, so we interviewed a bunch of fabulous people, all of whom, or nearly all of whom, didn't know who we were and just answered the call when we called and said, here's what we're working on. And one of them was Kate O'Keefe from Cisco's Chill Lab. And she's the one who sort of crystallized that's her quote. We need to think about ourselves like prototype and beta, and keep putting yourself in experiences where you get feedback. Also, Annalie Killian from Sparks and Honey says you have to it's an editing process to understand what it is that you're good at, what are that you enjoy, what is it that gives you purpose, passion, curiosity. Those are all fuel sources for lifelong learning and adaptation, and it's incredibly important we pay attention to them. So we have this idea of becoming something. You know, what are you going to be when you grow up? What's your major? What do you do? As this sort of singular state we're headed towards, when really we're always in some form of evolution, but we're not comfortable with that, I guess.
Right. Well, you referred to it as the traditional approach to things was that iterative, you called it 3 bands of life, right? Where you're learning and then work and then retirement. And that sort of safe and linear reality has been somewhat blown up just by this exponential rate of change that, as you say, is the slowest it'll ever be for you. You've got to retool. Is that correct? Are you seeing everyone? And I guess I'll place it in context, because right now everybody's worried about the rapid technological change that's threatening our own personal identities. Right? What job do I have? Will it be relevant? It's headline fodder to just say that AI is taking over everything and robots are coming for all that we are and all that we do. You start there, you end there. I love it, because that's such a significant part of the role that I've played and the discussions that I've had. You don't believe that robots are coming for all our jobs, and you believe that people should not focus just on sort of the automatable stuff, but focus on that which makes them human and makes them invaluable to enterprises and customers.
Correct. And so one of the things we tend to forget is this whole paradigm of learn, work, retire, and die is relatively new in human history. We've got 5,000 years of human history, and most of the time we were just surviving. There was no work, there was no school, it was all one kind of bucket. Yeah. Then it became these 3 bands. And those 3 bands have become sort of these fixed, like learning's the first third of your life, You get on the career ladder, you're trying to escalate up the career ladder to collect a pension and die a year later. And now the career arc's longer and much more volatile. So you're going to have multiple roles. So focusing singularly on one of them is to your detriment. And so I think that this virus is showing us, if anything, how highly adaptable we are. And I hope people are reflecting on this and saying, wow, look what we did. Imagine what we could do.
Right. So when I started my career, I went into consulting, and everyone told you that one of the most important things in your career was a comfort with ambiguity. Mm-hmm. Just mostly because it was just them covering their own butts, that they didn't know whether they'd be able to staff you on a project or not, and they didn't know if the project was going to be in this industry or that. So they were just sort of managing your expectations. You speak to that. You speak to flexibility and how that's different than adaptability. Explain why you chose adaptability and the adaptation advantage as the theme of the book.
Yeah. So again, one of the better people we interviewed, I mean, all the people we interviewed, I think made us better is what I mean to say, is Dr. Jeffrey Lapine from Arizona State, who made that careful distinction for us when we were early on in our kind of exploration of, I had these thought pillars from all the talks I'd done, and I knew what was resonating with audiences, but I was looking for that arc and trying to find the thing that made sense. Mm-hmm. And he said most people confuse flexibility and adaptability, and flexibility is reaching into your toolbox to use a tool you've used before, likely to do a process you've done before.
Okay.
Whereas adaptability is reaching into your toolbox, pulling out a half-formed tool and approaching a process you've never seen before, where you might be looking for the question as well as the answer. Right. And adaptability always requires letting go, unlearning, and it definitely requires learning.
Right.
As I look at the future in front of us, adaptability is just definitely the key word.
Right.
But we're not building people for adaptability. We're building people for persistence towards a singular goal, and we're priding ourselves on that. And persistence is good, except for when you're persisting towards the wrong thing.
Right. Well, so I loved that concept of not only learning, but unlearning. Mm-hmm. And it made me think exactly that. So take us into that topic. Is school, is grade school, is university, and are the skills that we're being taught at work setting us up to unlearn, to be adaptable?
No, I mean, when all of our focus is on getting the right answer, in a world where we need to understand new questions, and where technology is going to get the right answer, and we might as well let it, because it means we've already found it.
Right.
So if you look at our systems of learning right now, our K-12 system is largely a sorting process. Who's smart, who's going to higher ed, what classes do you need to take to get in the right university? Get in the right university, pick the right major, don't take anything outside your major, and get that first job, because we're going to declare a success based upon your first starting salary on a very long, very volatile career arc, where it's going to be so much more important for you to understand what fuels you, your purpose, your passion, your curiosity, how you learn and unlearn, and how you adapt between roles. I mean, it's going to be so much more important. There are 43, I think, million Americans right now who are dealing with that, and we've given them no tools to do it.
Right. And you just referenced learning those skills that effectively work with and complement where technology is going to meet us. You have a quote in the book that basically says your next job, I think this might have been from Thomas Friedman, who wrote the foreword, and who you cite throughout the book, but your next job starts where the robots stop, and learn to embrace that handoff. That I also don't think is something that we're doing, that I've seen handled very well in enterprise digital transformation efforts, let alone, as you say, people who currently are looking for work and trying to get back into enterprises.
Yeah, and I think there's two reasons for that, because one is we take a deficit approach. So we say to you, oh, well, technology is going to do this piece of your job. So suddenly you're back on your heels and you're feeling insecure and you're feeling replaced. We don't focus on what you have that's uniquely human that we want to build on, and how that technology is going to augment you, and how you're going to have to learn new things and unlearn some old things in order to get to that moment of augmentation.
Right.
So, one of the concepts I'm working on lately is just a little bit beyond the book, is that when you lose your job or when something changes, you can either be humiliated by it, or you can develop humility from it.
Mhm.
Humility is a birthplace of, I think, vulnerability and comfort with ambiguity and not knowing and self-reflection, from which you can learn and grow much stronger.
Right.
But I think we've set up a society where it's too much humiliation, not enough humility.
Yeah. You mentioned in the book, you tell the story too of Steve Jobs giving a keynote speech in which he talked about having lost his job and what that did for him. I had the privilege of having a similar situation early on in my career, and you're right. I mean, first of all, it didn't feel good, and I went through all of the sort of natural struggles with dealing with it, but I came out okay. It left a lot of lessons in me, a lot of appreciations for certain things, for skill development, also for living a frugal life and beneath your means, things like that. But I would have loved to have those lessons at that time, however many years ago. What do we need to do? And who's best positioned to teach people those self-reflective skills?
I think we all just got to start talking about it. Right now, it's 43 million Americans. There's enough of us to have the conversation, right?
Right.
Chris Shipley and I, my co-author, and I both share our stories. We both had stories of this in the book. We talk about job loss and failures and what we learned from them. And I absolutely believe that they were, for me, gifts. Happened early enough in life. We also wrote some articles outside the book, one of which was teaching students to lose their jobs so faculty can keep theirs, because my take on it is we've developed this whole system that is designed to have you avoid failure, when failure is like the beginning of learning. And job loss and change is a norm. And so how you recover from feeling rejected, because there is a feeling of rejection and fear and all that, and how you make sense of it, how you reflect on it, how you look at your skills and figure out, how am I going to add value now? These are really important pieces that we just completely designed out of the process.
Right. No, I couldn't agree more, from having been there at a point in time and looking at these really challenging dynamics, both of the impact technology might have on the roles that we may have gone to school to learn, and then obviously pandemic and the effects that the world is having. I do enjoy, you did point out some real old tomes. There were studies that were done that I cited 10 years ago that highlighted the percentage of jobs that could be automatable, and you very efficiently walk through the flaws in some of that thinking, as far as that which can be automatable or not, and really sort of the bigger picture of the skills that enterprises need. So thank you for doing that. I won't name some of the studies, but it's good to see that we're evolving in the way that we're thinking about really a black and white automate versus human sort of job. Yep. Want to stay on humans one more moment and then move to enterprises. So and I guess it applies to both, but you've got this great Iceberg model that highlights this strata of capabilities and skills. Can you walk us through the Iceberg model?
Sure. Just to back up for a second. So we look at technology change consuming tasks. So we stay at that, and that is the top of the iceberg.
Right.
One of the things that I noted in there that kind of links to the iceberg is we're going through the most rapid, I believe, societal and cultural changes, so that technology may be moving fast, and our adaptation or adoption of the technology is really rapid, and that's having huge impacts on our life. But I have 14 dimensions, I think in the book it's 14, I'm adding them all the time, of the ways in which our society is changing, and it's making people really uncomfortable around answering the questions, who are you, what do you do, and where you're from. So it's everything from racial changes to age changes. We're an aging society, to the family unit, more single parents, more same-sex couples. So it's not mom and dad and 2.5 kids. Changes to leadership. I mean, look at the racial changes that have happened in the past, like 2 or 3 weeks. It's incredible. Gender was fixed and binary. Now it's decidedly fluid in most parts of the world. And all these changes are impacting, for some people, making some people feel comfortable, finally, and some other people, for some reason, very uncomfortable because they're not sure where they fit or how to behave. And in order to learn and adapt, you have to be comfortable being vulnerable. So the iceberg, at the top of the iceberg is the skills for which you're hired. And so we see those, they're out of the water. We pay attention to what technology might do. There replaces the skills the humans might do. At the waterline, I call them enablers or uniquely human skills. People call them soft skills. That's the stuff that's very difficult to automate. And it's where humans have a huge advantage. Creativity, collaboration, empathy, divergent thinking, those sorts of things. And then below that is your ability to learn and adapt, which I call an agile learning mindset. It's your understanding of yourself, understanding of how you learn, your ability to assess market changes and how you play into that, where you apply your skills. And then at the base of that is that identity piece I just talked about, where the societal and cultural changes for some folks are making it very hard. So if the base of the pyramid, the base of the iceberg is really damaged, then it's difficult to just focus on the skills at the top. So we need to help people feel comfortable while these changes are taking place, help them develop an agile learning mindset, put more emphasis on developing those uniquely human skills, and then look at the skills to do. Because most of the times when a company hires you, they identifies the skills to do in the job description. That's the only ones they know of. The job is absolutely going to change. And your ability to learn and adapt, your uniquely human skills, and your resilient and adaptive identity that's tied to a fuel source, which is purpose, passion, curiosity, is what's going to mark the difference for you.
Yes. Amazing. I hesitate to do this sometimes because this does get pushed out over podcasts with just sound too. But so the book has an iceberg right there that is both beautiful because there's colors to it and really does speak to that. And as you said, the dimensions of societal and cultural change, which really does take on quite a, obviously it was meaningful anyway, but then through the lens of 2020 and global pandemic and discussions around equality and diversity and inclusion. You wrote this before much of what's been happening over the last few months, obviously, but does it just reinforce that lens? What do you think as far as societal change? Is it going even faster than you thought it was as a result of current events?
Yeah, I mean, some of the things Chris and I identified in the book as, we are not paying attention to some of this stuff. And Warren Buffett had this expression, when the tide goes out, you find out who's swimming naked. And he used that expression to determine, if you got a broken business model, but you got a raging market, you disguise it. We've got so many structural inequities that are really, I think that we're reframing it wrong. I mean, they're wrong. But from a corporate standpoint, your diversity is your strength. It's not a nice to have. It's not an HR strategy. It's a corporate strategy.
Right.
In the third part of the book, when we talk about leadership, fastest way to build highly adaptive teams is to have a combination of cognitive diversity, which is representative as well as thinking diversity, and psychological safety. And we tend to form teams with people who think like us. Why do you think companies are all white, straight men? Because they picked all people just like themselves. And we all, whatever dimension of difference it is, we all have to go outside of our comfort zones because it will help us be stronger.
Couldn't agree more. And personally, I've been involved in a lot of discussions, and obviously you can't not see what's going on in the news that forces you to evaluate that which you may have absorbed or learned into the way that you've even recruited, hired, supported, trained, and engaged in norms that maybe you didn't think enough about. So no, I think it was impactful to be reading it the way that you put it, with the data that you cite to back up all of these points of view in light of today's events. So I very much want to get to the leadership element that you talked about, but first want to make a pit stop at enterprise because you talk about this ability to evolve and be adaptable from a personal level, having humans be more comfortable with learning new skills and treat their career as an ever evolving beta. But you also make the same statements and cite the same guidance for enterprises, that enterprises also have to be far more adaptable. And what I thought was so powerful is you started with sort of this, you gave this juxtaposition of you're either in a situation where you're trying to achieve scalable efficiency, do more of the same, better, faster, cheaper, or or something else, and you relate to that as really scalable learning with several different evolutions of that. So I guess first and foremost, define the difference between scalable efficiency and this scalable learning concept.
Sure. So again, I stand on the shoulders of a lot of giants. So this is John Hagel's from Deloitte's concept. And he observed that, in the last, couple of decades, we have our economy has run by making things faster and cheaper. And we have organized companies to just shake all the buffers out of it and make it as highly efficient as possible. But in this, when we reach to a point where technology can do a lot of the efficiency, and you really need people who can explore. So another one I quote is David Eagleman, who says that our cognition, our brains work in a couple of modes, whether you're a low-level vermin or a human, and that's exploration and exploitation. So an animal will explore to find a source of food and then exploit that source of food until it's depleted. Well, we've worked the same way in business. Mm-hmm. We explore to find a new business model, and we exploit that business model until it runs out. And scalable efficiency is just a huge exercise in exploiting that business model. Yeah. And now we're at a place that more of us need to explore, and we're not preparing people for that. And in organizations, when we define ourselves by our product, which is another example, we talk about how we should think about a company as cultural and capacity rather than brand and product, because brand is just an expression of culture. And product or service, your value unit, is just evidence of your capacity. It's exhaust from your learning. So if you can focus on the inputs, you're in a much better position to adapt and thrive.
And I love that distinction of really focusing on purpose, focusing on what the organization could be and its identity, because we talked a lot about that in the world of automating and future of work being algorithms and software is that a lot of enterprises struggled with change because this is the way we've always done it. Mm-hmm. And even when they started to embrace the technologies available, it was very much a scalable efficiency model of just doing the way they've always done it, but with technology. But you bring in that added element of really not only understanding that resistance to change or sort of staying in that safe place, but understanding that you really have to understand who you are as an organization. So how does an organization embrace this agile learning mentality and philosophy? How do you get people to be eager to be uncomfortable and to constantly be, challenging their traditional beliefs and learning new skills?
Yeah, you always got to give people something to focus on. They need a touchstone, a North Star, a handrail, whatever expression works for you. Sure. And we have become comfortable with that touchstone being the brand and the product. Yeah. And that traps you in the past, because that's driving looking in the rearview mirror. Instead, you've got to engage people on what you believe and where you have alignment and values. So every organization should answer the questions: why do we exist? How does the world look differently because we exist? And the first thing being your mission, and the second thing being your vision, and then your values. What will and won't you do to achieve your mission and fulfill your vision? And once you do that, you can start recruiting people for alignment with those values. So they'll have the requisite skills to do whatever first job you're hiring them to do, knowing that they're going to be on a learning tour. But when you're engaged based upon a mission, and Simon Sinek observed this, more than 10 years ago with his Start With Why concept, you make a deeper connection, not only with your employees, but also your customers, and they can go along with you as you evolve. Right. But when you define yourself by your outputs, your products and services, you're just constantly stuck in that paradigm. It's very hard to undo, unlearn,
right,
et cetera.
Well, and I like that you don't beat around the bush either. It's learning is nice to have and evolving is good, but you come right out and say effectively the ability to learn, not only learn, but learn faster than your competitors may determine whether you exist in the near future.
Yep.
So this isn't a nice to have. It's not, you get to decide whether you're a learning culture or not. You have to decide whether you want to exist at all or not.
Right. Peter Senge said that like 50 years ago. It's the only sustainable competitive advantage. And, our hope is only to build on some of the work of some of these folks who've said these things a long time ago.
Right.
And
what do you see? Is because you spend a lot of time speaking to a lot of enterprises. If they're smart and successful, they bring you in to speak to them, or at least if they're smart. And who knows if they're successful? But how are you helping them to to see themselves through this lens of adaptability and I guess self-assess whether they really are being true to, or whether they understand a purpose, whether they're being true to it?
Sure. So we're still stuck in the, what do I need to learn? What do I need to study? What do I need to hire? What products should I offer? We're kind of stuck in this lunging thing. And I think probably the greatest value I give an organization is to say, all right, let's stop and understand how much the earth beneath your feet have moved. And let's look at sort of how it was, how it is now, how it was, how it is now, and get people comfortable with those shifts in context, because you get people to start to adapt, and they've got to change across how they define themselves, how they approach their work, how companies define themselves, how we lead. I mean, these are huge tectonic shifts. But first, you have to understand why. So I was explaining to someone recently who said, I love the book, and I'm trying to figure out the how-to of it. And I was like, this is more of a why you need to, with some sprinklings of how-to in there. But I don't think we can get to how-to until we get more people to understand why you need to.
Right. And so, okay, so this is perfect pivot from the enterprise themselves to the leadership of that enterprise. Because I completely agree. One of the topics that comes up a lot in discussions with visionaries, with authors, with people who have done what you do is this recognition that we need to do things faster. The word acceleration comes up a lot now in discussions, that we need to accelerate towards more digital transformation. We need to accelerate towards a more agile or modern business. But I sort of equate it to, it would be like building a house without a blueprint and with a perhaps less than outstanding carpenter, plumber, electrician, and then you decide you need to build that house faster. And I'm not sure that agility alone is going to get you where you're trying to go to. So let's talk about leadership, because that really is going to be a cornerstone to getting enterprises to achieve any sort of adaptive advantage. So talk to me about what should leaders do, to your point, immediately to set themselves up to be leading organizations to succeed in the future.
Sure. So I just want to address the acceleration piece as part of that. So the world is moving really fast, and we all have to learn and adapt sort of more quickly than we did in the past. But that does not mean lunging at things. It doesn't mean just faster scalable efficiency. Sometimes it means pausing and saying, are we even answering the right question? Much more situational awareness, much more scanning the landscape. Because from a leadership perspective, in the scalable efficiency world, we were just looking at other humans like depersonalized units of productivity. And how can I squeeze more out of them? And how can I squeeze more out of them? And how can I produce more? And in reality, we've got to look at, how do I inspire them? Because the future of work, I think, is just a series of learning tours, where if you look at technology consuming more mentally routine and predictable tasks, that's going to drive the efficiency. So we need the humans to stop every once in a while and say, okay, what are we doing? What's our vision, our mission, our values? Who are we trying to serve? Who's on my team, and how do I inspire them? Because you're going to get much, Dan Pink wrote this 12 years ago, I think it was, Drive. You're going to get much more out of people if you know how to light their fire rather than the carrots and stick stuff.
Right. I'm disturbed. So you're saying ready, fire, aim doesn't work? That's too bad.
No.
Yeah, okay. So let's expand on that. So again, the leaders of an organization have to inspire their people. Actually, before we get into, and you have sort of three different areas in which a leader can be leading and adding value to their team, to their organization. But you've said a few times now, learning tours. Define that for us. What is a learning tour?
So, every day you go to work, or you dial into work now, as the case may be, and you're kind of focused on, what's my job, what's my title, what's on my task list, what am I getting done, when is that product coming out, or whatever unit of value you're processing or producing. And in the space of doing that, you don't pay attention to what you've learned. You don't pay attention. When you make a mistake, you do as quickly as you can. You try to recover it. You try to cover up for it. So, when I talk to leaders, I always say, if you're leading by impression management, where you're hiding the things you don't know, you're hiding your insecurities, and you're not being clear with your vulnerabilities and saying, here's something I don't know. Here's something I'm thinking about. Here's where we made a mistake we could learn from. You're signaling to everybody in your team to do the same thing.
Right.
And you're creating greater vulnerabilities in the bad way for your team with your refusal to be vulnerable yourself.
I love that. I've found situations where I found myself openly brainstorming sometimes, and people take it as the directive and they go off and do that. And I realize I need to be much more clear about the fact that I don't actually know whether that's the right thing to do or not. I'm just brainstorming, and join me, won't you, in that, because we can all learn together. Right. So you cite 3 different areas that a leader should really embrace: modeling vulnerability. You've touched on that. Learning from failure, I really like that one. Want to hear more about that one. And then finally, providing psychological safety.
Yep.
So, learning from failure. What's an example of that really resonates with enterprises you speak with?
Just the idea that, like, you could have a product launch that completely flopped, but if you don't spend a lot of time talking about and thinking about where did we go wrong, what did we learn, where was the misstep, and not to find somebody to fire, which tends to be the way to look at it, but to say this could be the greatest source of our learning. I think Bill Gates said that 10 years ago or 5 years ago, and he said your unhappy customer is your greatest source of learning. And that's the kind of thing we need to embrace. When you look at a company like Amazon, which is wildly successful across a number of dimensions, everything they do is about learning. Every product and service they sell you is just an input to learn more about you. And that's the approach we need to take. The product, the unit of value you're selling is just a vehicle to learn more, whether it succeeds or fails. And that's what I've heard the term learning, failure through learning. I think that's something we really need to embrace.
Learning. I have not heard that term, and I will now work it into dialogue from now on. And then, and finally, this psychological safety that a leader can provide. I imagine that's an allusion to, learn from failures, don't be afraid of them, share what's happened so that we can all benefit from that. Is that what you mean, or is there more to it?
Yeah. So again, I'm going to quote one of the other giants I stand on. Dr. Amy Edmondson coined the term psychological safety, I think in like 98 or 99. She was studying hospital teams or research teams, medical, and found, the teams that really had the breakthroughs were the ones who didn't not make mistakes, but embrace those mistakes as soon as they made them and said, okay, what happened? Where's the learning? How do we move on from here? And teams that can do that are much healthier. They learn so much faster. And on the psychological safety, some of it is, making it okay for people to fail. Like, you don't want people to hide their failures. Mm-hmm. And some of it is, mental health check-in, I think. And right now is a really important time. I mean, one of the statistics we use in the book is it's almost 20%, according to the National Institute of Mental Health, folks who are suffering from some form of mental health challenge, anxiety, depression, etc. Mm-hmm. Many of them undiagnosed. So if you have more than 5 people on your team, chances are good somebody's suffering and probably in silence.
Right.
You layer on the global pandemic and a recession, that number doubles. Mm-hmm. And the mental health of your team is your success or failure. So we haven't focused on humans as humans, and it's really time we start doing that, because if you can maximize human potential by addressing mental health, establishing psychological safety, being clear that your goals are not just producing some unit of value, but learning so that you can produce units from which you learn more, you're on a much better path to be a learning organization and thriving.
It's tremendous. And you're right. I think hopefully one of the nice things is, while we're physically distant, we, through technologies and tools available to us like video conferencing, we're able to be together virtually more often and more easily. And hopefully we're using that as a way to just to take a sort of a temperature check of every individual as well as the team. Yeah. I also think it's also broken down some of the formality, if you will, of levels and team distance, et cetera. You can spend more time with people because I've seen it. It is hard for everyone. Some people are stuck at home alone. Some are stuck at home with their family, and both those scenarios can be a source of stress and challenge in light of the pandemic.
For sure. And one of the things that's breaking down is this kind of whole idea of bringing your authentic self to work. Now,
Yeah.
you see wood paneling behind me. I'm at my parents' cottage today.
Mhm.
There's no hiding where you are.
Right.
I don't have children, but I've been on so many Zooms or meetings where people's kids will run up to them, their dog will jump on their lap,
Mhm.
something will happen, and you're starting to see more of who people are in a way that I think is really positive.
Right. It's we're getting to the end of our time, and thank you so much. Again, we'll put for anyone listening now live or after the fact, we'll put links to. There's some really good YouTube clips of you, Heather, giving some of your keynote speeches, showing how you leverage visuals so powerfully to make your points. And then as well, we'll share a link to your book. One point that really struck me, and you talked again back to the enterprise and scalable efficiency versus this sort of scalable learning.
Mm-hmm.
There was the value of just information.
Mm-hmm.
And in some cases it's technical. You refer to the ability to have sensors and technology and connectivity to assets. But it also made me think of that as you were talking about just this more open informality with your team. We're collecting more information about everything, or at least we can and we should, to know what motivates people, where they are in their learning journey, what they might be worried about, what they might be inspired by, their purpose, as well as the more operational finance information, asset information. It feels like technology is giving us a chance to access, to model, to measure all of those. And I hope that we have the skill sets developed to actually use them, right? And that we're not still managing by numbers and treating people as automatons and cogs in a machine to produce the product we've always produced. So I guess I'll ask you to sort of take us out. What sort of key takeaways, what discussions do you have on stage with people to really that they take away from both your research before, your research in the Adaptation Advantage that you think our listeners need to hear in this interesting time we're all in?
Well, first, I'd like to say that, there's a lot of people out there saying, oh, if you didn't learn Mandarin during this shutdown, then you're a failure, or what are you going to do with this time with the economy frozen? First of all, you're doing an amazing job. Amazing. What's happened in the first 2 weeks, which is, we're still in this sort of, nothing's really changed since then.
Right.
Number of people who could be a parent and a worker and worry about elderly parents and check in on neighbors. Yeah. I think we hit a form of peak human potential I hadn't expected. And I'm really proud of us as humans. The way we're standing up for each other and the more vulnerable of us in terms of racial injustice and seeking greater inclusion is incredible. One of the things that I've been citing in my talks lately is because cultural anthropologist Margaret Mead was asked what was the earliest evidence of civilization. And they thought she'd say hunting tools or clay pots or religious items or something like that. And she said it was a healed human femur bone. Because it's your thigh bone. In order for your thigh bone to heal, you can't hunt, you can't fish. Somebody has to take care of you. And so that's the first time that humans operated collectively for the greater good. And I feel like in this moment, we have frozen the economy, which is really difficult for a lot of people to protect our most vulnerable, protect our healthcare workers. I'm seeing so much more appreciation. People we used to call low skill or low paid workers are now essential workers. The only thing spreading faster than the virus is our collective sense of community and empathy and our ability to collaborate. If we get a vaccine out of this at breakneck speed, it's going to be because humans collaborated on a way that they never have before. So as dismaying as it might be in this moment, you are doing a tremendous job, each and every person out there. And I just want people to recognize that. I think you're doing a tremendous job. We got a lot of stuff to figure out, no doubt. But inside of 2 weeks of the first 30 days, the amount of adaptation and collaboration was just unprecedented.
Amazing summary. Thank you. I could never do any better than that. Thank you for the positive outlook, for the summary of truly the collaboration that is occurring globally. I've seen it, I've felt it, I'm encouraged by it, and it was so well put. So Heather McGowan, thank you so much again for being a guest on OneTAKE. For all those who haven't seen it yet, I suggest order this immediately, the Adaptation Advantage. We'll put links to it in the show notes. Thanks, everyone. Hope you're all healthy, well, and safe, and look forward to speaking to you again soon on another episode of OneTAKE.
Thank you.